Why I like Andrew Tate, the most famous man in the world at the moment. Everyone's talking about him. I just thought I'd give my take on him recently being cancelled. I think it's actually a bad thing for society to cancel someone like Andrew Tate, and I'll explain why I respect him more than other tall, handsome, good-looking guys that are very similar to him. Uh, to start with, my grandfather came from Luton. That's apparently where uh, the Tate brothers came from. Luton is a shithole. My grandfather came from there, and he was a fighter too. He was apparently the champion of this area. I don't know. It's just stories I've been handed down. I've tried to googling him. I can't find him. My grandfather was a bit of a criminal. He'd get into a lot of street fights. He came to Australia and then bounced from city to city, banging every girl he could get his hands on. I think he's got 20 different children in Australia that there's little litters dropped all over the place, and single mothers dropped all over the place, and those mothers have had children. Those children have had children as well. So he's got a massive family littered throughout Australia, and that's where I come from. That's my grandfather came from there. Um, and while he was in Australia, he would grab dynamite and do home invasions and blow up safes to try and get cash. So I can kind of recognize where he would come from. I grew up in a ghetto myself, um, and I started out in Maroubra. You can check out. Maroubra is a shitty housing commission, quite a dangerous area. Russell Crowe, he made a documentary on Maroubra in Sydney, called the Bra Boys. It's like a gang. That's where I started life. So I can identify with a few things there. But most guys that of his stature, someone around 6'2", 6'3", as soon as they get a little bit of money, they get a little bit of status, they just go with it, and they tend to shit on people beneath them. Let me give you an example. Have you heard of the world's greatest ever UFC fighter, Demetrius Johnson? Even I've forgotten his name. The world's greatest ever fighter, Demetrius Johnson. Probably not. You said Mighty Mouse, they used to call him. You probably haven't heard of him because he's small, and his weight class was like featherweight, very small, lightweight, whatever. Nobody cared about this guy dominating the UFC. They only cared about some big meathead in the heavyweight division that had like 3 wins under his belt. Uh, Society is skewed towards the biggest, genetically superior men. That's just how the world works. It really is just how the world works. It doesn't matter how competent you are. It's hard to get out of your situation unless you're extremely talented. And even if you are extremely talented, you still will be held down by society. This is just generally how it is. And this is why I like the fact that the Tate brothers, with their genetic advantages, their hard work, they still, when they made it, they would come out and talk about men's issues. And I think this is really important when you're looking at someone like Demetrius Johnson, who's, I don't know, it's like things like 5 foot or something. He's tiny. They called him Mighty Mouse. He was unbeatable. He would bash everybody they would put in front of him. He slaughtered everybody. The most famous guys in the world, he would slaughter them. He was a great fighter, arguably the best that has ever lived, and you don't even know who he is. Why? Because you're small, right? And this is just unfortunately how the world works. I also myself, this was before I had my first hip replacement. I was training at a gym called Bulldog Gym. And one of my friends was a Muay Thai trainer. He would train Muay Thai, but he came from more of a wealthier background, and he didn't have that fighting spirit. He didn't come from the bottom, right? So he would generally get in and do the semi-contact nights, but he never did an amateur fight. He never got in the ring ever. He just wanted to train so he had a good body so he could bang a lot of girls. And he would punch down on men all the time. He would think that he was superior to other men just purely because he was about 6'2" and relatively jacked and the big V and everything, and he was very arrogant. He actually reminds me of Andrew Tate in many ways. The difference is he was a coward and Andrew Tate actually got in the ring. That's a huge difference there. And that's why when I see a lot of my friend in Andrew Tate's far more of a man because he actually got in the ring. He actually got in there and put his body on the line. And getting in the ring can be very dangerous as well. And it's important to understand that men, when they are of stature, this is how society will manipulate the whole thing. You got the heavyweights, you got the bigger guys at the top that will get a lot of the advantages, and it doesn't matter how competent, how awesome a lot of the guys at the bottom, they just cannot seem to get out of their situation, no matter how competent they are. There's just so many barriers if you come from, the ghetto. You have to be an extremely hardworking and super intelligent, and just tick all of these boxes. You have to have the tenacity to get out of a shithole. Someone like myself, I don't take a day off. I'm constantly trying to figure out how to get out of my situation. I'm in my early 40s now. Coming from the ghetto isn't easy, and I'm way under 6 foot. I'm 5'8", and so I'd also noticed that a lot of my friends, a lot of my friends are generally a lot larger than me. I met them through playing rugby. I saw there's a guy in the red pill. There's a guy in the red pill community. He's got a beard. He's kind of like the hangs out with Rolo all the time. Very monotone. One of these red pill guys, he tweeted about the haka, and he hits the gym all the time. He looks relatively good, which is easy to do. All you have to do is have enough money and time to spend time in the gym, right? But he posted the haka and was tweeting about how masculine it is. But this guy's never played rugby in his life, probably never been to New Zealand, and definitely never played rugby and faced the haka. I've faced the haka 4 times in my life playing rugby, and I've toured New Zealand and faced it. And there is a lot of this mythology amongst the manosphere where there's the guys that they talk a tough game, but they've never really lived that life. And there's a lot of guys out there that do talk like that. I think that Andrew Tate is a little bit different because he's actually lived that life. When he talks about the violence in the world, he's 100% correct, Myself, I think there's a possibility that both my hips being worn out, my right knee definitely, could have been because of me playing rugby and going a little bit too hard. But this is what happens in the ghetto. You're surrounded by idiots, as in poor role models, women that don't know anything about the world. The ghetto is generally run by violent nutcases and women who perpetuate the violence in the ghetto. It's terrible. And I think the idea of encouraging myself as a kid to go out and play rugby, and in my early 20s still believing that it was a good idea to play rugby, facing the haka several times and coming off covered in blood and, just awful things like that, trying to prove how tough you are, which is something that only really happens in the ghetto because you're surrounded by poor role models. This is the type of environment where it's like the kill or be killed sort of environment. And I think Andrew Tate understands that because he came from a shithole. Like someone like myself understands the struggles where probably a lot of his friends are on drugs or, have a lot of bad things going on in their lives at the moment, and can never get out of it. Like some of my relatives will never get out of that ghetto mindset. And I think it's quite admirable that someone made it and then decided after making it, instead of just focusing on continuing to be successful, to go out there and talk about men's issues. Where if I had a role model when I was, 5, 10 years old, I had access to the internet, and I could watch the messages that Andrew Tate was giving out. I think it would have resonated with me at an early stage, to the point where he does talk about violence and things like that. I think that's something that the message could have been tweaked a little bit, because personally I would have preferred to have a role model when I was younger to tell me, don't play rugby, don't get involved in violence, just stay away from it. There's no real benefit to getting involved in street fights or anything like that, and I wouldn't have all of these injuries that I have today because of that. I think it would have saved me a lot of time to just be told, look, just focus on making money and picking up girls. If anyone's violent, just stay the fuck away from them. And but when you grow up in the ghetto, you're taught to, if someone belittles you or talks shit about you, you have to go bash their head in. And that's not, that only damages you over time, because there's only, live by the sword, die by the sword. You can only do that so many times before you tear up your entire body. And that's arguably what happened to me. Both my hips have been replaced, as you probably saw in the pre-roll little video. My right knee hyperextended. It's bone on bone at the moment. Probably will be for the rest of my life. And that's put a lot of things out of whack in my back and everything else. But I think on average, if we had have changed that one little part of Andrew Tate's messaging, to try and convince men, look, just hit the gym, do low impact things, try to avoid violence, focus on making money and picking up girls. I like the way that he would talk about intelligence. I think making men aware that being intelligent is something to aspire to, not being a dumb meathead that plays rugby or gets involved in fights in the street, because that type of masculinity is not, it only damages your body over time, and I'm a prime example of that. And eventually someone's going to use a weapon on you. I've had multiple weapons used on me in the past, and it's not exactly a good thing when you get attacked and then the police come around because you come from like a shithole and you have no proper backing from society, and then the police come and investigate you even though you're innocent. You're the innocent bystander in a violent crime. That type of stuff, I think the messaging needed to be tweaked a little bit there, but on average I would say that pushing back against, as Andrew Tate calls it, the Matrix, we need someone like that out there. And when he went massively viral this year, I literally thought, wow, it's gone mainstream, something's going to change, maybe. And the fact that he got cancelled made me start to think, these evil motherfuckers in the government, they have just too much power. That they just have too much power, and they're bad for the West. I would say, I think it's also maybe a sign of the proper collapse of the West as well. You probably notice on my channel, I can't film infields. If I pick up girls in Sydney, I have to be very careful. I can't even film someone's face in Sydney. Like the most lame, simplistic things I can't even do in Australia. It says a lot about Australia as a country. And what it's done is you got the black pill guys, you've got the wheat waffles and things like that over in England. You've got men that haven't got laid in, I think it's 1/3 of every man over the past couple years. 1/3 of all men under the age of, what is it, 25 or 21? I don't know exactly the exact stats, but it's a large amount of men have not got laid or are still virgins, and don't have any hope of getting out of that situation, don't have a girlfriend, don't have any love from the opposite sex in the last, say, 2 years since the lockdowns. These are massive stats. These men are also a growing minority that don't really like society. They don't really like the society that they grew up in. And they haven't figured out a way to benefit from the society. People like myself, super intelligent. I'm a Mensa member. I'm able to think my way out of complex problems, even if I did come from the ghetto. But the majority of men, they get stuck in these situations. They're stuck. This is a growing minority of people that are born here, and I'm not sure if the government can import enough immigrants that would be happy to deal with this society, or defend this society when external pressures, geopolitical pressures start to push on our society. So I think the banning of Andrew Tate is a symptom of the corrupt elites and this agenda that's been going on, which in turn weakens us domestically and makes it easier for external powers to pull the string a little bit, which will fray a little bit, and there'll be a cascading event where the rest of the West collapses. I would also argue that the American empire is on its knees. Even though the media is telling us otherwise, I don't see any reason to believe that the American empire is strengthening at this stage. There's a lot of insanity out there. Banning of Andrew Tate is a symptom of a greater geopolitical problem that is arising. And some of you guys that have been following me for a long time and my geopolitical thoughts, a lot of the debts from World War II are coming in. They've almost paid back all their debts. The United States debt trap diplomacy is about to end. And I think that banning Andrew Tate, or just Andrew Tate, is a symptom of men just being sick of being pushed around. But the banning of Andrew Tate is also a symptom of the collapse of the West. So either way, that's a whole bunch of complicated issues that I just threw at you guys. But I think Andrew Tate is a symptom of the collapse of the West. I think that the banning of him is another message that you guys need to take note of, is that when someone like that gets taken down, who is elected by the people, because historically we have been given stars, and you've been presented with a star and told that that person's a star without you choosing, and they just put it on TV and everyone and the media tells you who the star is. These days we can choose our own stars. Andrew Tate was a chosen star. Andrew Tate was not elected by the media and the elites to become a star, which has happened forever throughout history. Every other star before the internet was invented was a manufactured star by the elites. Now, Now that's a Matrix one for you. You go back and look at every star. If you're from England, the Beatles were manufactured. Why? Who was behind them? Then we go down a real rabbit hole. But we're definitely not going to do that today. The message of today's video is that I think Andrew Tate was good for society. I think the fact that he didn't just train to look good, he made money and he got in the ring and actually fought. I know a lot of Muay Thai fighters that just train for the body so they can bang girls, and they don't actually put anything on the line, and they talk tough. And you probably think that they're tough, but they're not. They never actually fought someone their own size or their own weight division. And someone like myself that couldn't avoid violence growing up, I was surrounded by it, attacked with multiple weapons throughout my life. I think some sort of a steady, quite concise, well-spoken man like Andrew Tate was good for society, because it pulls back the curtains of what a lot of men have to suffer from in the lower and middle classes, and we've been ignored for too long. So that's my video today. Like even myself, not many of you have probably watched this far into this video. Even like myself, I had that Sterling Cooper guy reach out to me on my Instagram, and we had a chat about collaborating. He was just looking for guys to collaborate, and he was okay with the size of the audience that I have to collaborate, but he just changed his mind at the end, and I suspect it's related to genetics. So he was choosing a lot of guys that he could, let's just say, the whole Mighty Mouse thing. Guys get it. And this is good for you guys to just acknowledge that you are sometimes getting beaten down by society, and it has nothing to do with you. You can work as hard as you want. And Mighty Mouse, Demetrius Johnson style, you'll still get beaten down by society. People won't want to collaborate with you. It won't be entirely your fault. It'll just be because of your stature, which is out of your control. There's a lot of things out of your control. And I suspect something along those lines happened with me possibly getting a collaboration with Sterling Cooper. I didn't reach out to him. He reached out to me. He's the one that followed me on Instagram, and so it wasn't the other way around. I'm not really reaching out to guys anymore, but I suspect this is also a big factor of it. And I think that Andrew Tate would talk about these men's issues and bring them to light. That some men get advantages when they don't necessarily deserve it, just based on their genetics, which is a very black pill way of thinking. I'm aware of that, but it's just how the world works, and that's why you need better strategies to overcome them. Even with this, I'm going to figure out a way to overcome this adversity so that I can build a channel, get a lot of clients. I know that my method of game works because I've put in the time and work and effort to do that. I know I'm a good coach, and I know I can get some good results out of guys. I know it because I've put in more work than most guys, no matter what the disadvantages are that will be holding me back. And this is something that a lot of guys, they're told doesn't matter, but it does matter. And I think Andrew Tate would bring it up quite often in those interviews. And I think that's a good thing. I think that needs to be spoken about more often. We need more of a meritocracy in society. You shouldn't just be born into wealth. You shouldn't. This whole monarchy idea is a feminine idea. The idea that you're born into status, power, and competence. You're not. Meritocracies aren't like that. And men function better in meritocracies where there's upward mobility, so we can battle our way to the top, and the best will survive and get to the top. But society, especially the West, has become, cronyism has taken over, and it's become so corrupt that if you were born in the bottom, it's hard to get up there unless you have those genetic advantages, unless you have like some family members that are on the level, or you also born with a high IQ, or you get lucky somehow. And being a meritocracy, or more of a meritocracy, will just make it better for men, because men thrive in a meritocracy where you earn your place in society, not a society where you're born into it. And I think that the West has become this cronyism. Cronyism has taken over, where people who are getting positions and getting status in society when they don't deserve it. So I think that was a big part, or what I took away from a lot of the interviews and little snippets that would pop up in my feed of Andrew Tate, was that meritocracies rule. We need more of a meritocracy, and this cronyism and corruption that has infested Western society, especially the United States, probably more so in Australia actually, is bad for men. So I'm disappointed that he got cancelled. I'm actually very disappointed that he got cancelled. And yeah, I got nothing else to say. I'll see you guys in the next video.